In the era after King Arthur, the last battlefield. Our story, day after day after day, battles rage on the last battlefield, with neither side able to gain a clear advantage. Outnumbered, the Allies must use their every clever battle call, take every chance, just to stay even. The battle calls of the flight of the seagull, the sting of the bee, and the charge of the wounded bear are called and provide many gains, but eventually they are learned by the enemy and become useless. The Allies are gradually being pushed back. The final battle call. The Allies are losing the main battle, and Perceval must play his last three desperate cards. The Navy is recalled from their ships to act as one more battlefield unit, a risky maneuver, for the ships could be taken. Perceval then asks the trumpeter to blow a battle call that everyone knows but never thought they'd hear. Wafting over the field comes the call of the crane. Then he calls for his crimson spear. Of course, the crane, Gawain's complicated invention, is so ridiculous that it might even work. But it is also very risky, for with the openings left by its wide-ranging flank movements, entire battle wings can be lost quickly during vulnerability windows, which are both planned and unplanned. However, it does seem to be made for a large-scale battle and has now become the perfect battle call. The crane now puts all of its weight on one leg and attacks the enemy's weakest spot in order to disrupt their battle formation. But won't our heroes be surrounded eventually? Meanwhile, the ships are abandoned, the Navy comes in, adding its men. The crane builds slowly but surely, yet it is also dynamic, and many of the captains often hear the trumpeter call them back to the standard for changes.
Sir Valor, the right wing is giving way. Take your warrior troubadours and relieve the pressure. Gawain, the Huns are swarming out of the vale and will get to our rear. Drive them back. Tristram, prepare the knights behind the hill for the final charge of the pincer and slice. I will soon join you. Oin.
The crane barely holds together at times, but seems to be working. All Allied forces are now committed to the battle, and it is win or die, for there are no reserves to call on. Unless the large troop of sailors from the ships can be counted upon, and they are still far away, but racing toward the roar of battle. This is the moment that the knights were born and bred for, far outnumbered and fighting in the enemy's center. Perceval now throws his personal safety to the wind and transforms his king's command and guard into a roving extra lance unit. It is an option of the crane, albeit a most desperate one. And so the Allies' standard is left to fall and does so. The golden standard is down. The Allies know it as a trick, but one would always retrieve the golden standard from the dusty earth. But the enemy now senses the apparent winning momentum and rushes to the spot. The Huns especially sense victory, but the battle is far from won for the Huns. Trumpets now blow the final option of the crane. Poets and troubadours still tell of the mighty deeds that took place that day. The crane confuses the enemy. Just when his victory is assured, battle formations magically change and take the fight elsewhere. Sir Valor and his companions at arms have saved the right wing when the trumpet calls them to the standard.
But what of the left wing?
Wonders Perceval, who couldn't cover it. He glances back. A troop of wild men come storming down the slope and scatter the enveloping Turks.
Who are they? The Navy! Suddenly, the enemy is in a very vulnerable spot as lance units approach from every direction, yet seemingly from nowhere. Hengist realizes that he must get his warriors out of the vale and behind the shield wall, or they will be at a disadvantage as all of the crane's final effects suddenly become all too apparent to the enemy leader.
Then the knights of the Round Table come pouring over the crest of the hill in a glittering flood into the nightly packed hordes. They crash at angles, slicing off small sections, and these groups, too small to contend with mounted knights, run for safety. The seeds of panic have been sown. The earth shakes as the last mounted knights, lance points gleaming, come thundering from the fold of the ridge where they were concealed. The mighty knights of the Round Table form the terrible wedge and, like a plowshare, cut a crimson path, lopping off small sections for a foe fleeing in panic is helpless, and the knights, with true medieval ferocity, reap a grim harvest. Suddenly there is great alarm on the Allied side, for Hengist, the enemy leader, reaches his panicking troops and directs them to the unguarded Allied fleet. They will escape and will perhaps raid Britain while the knights are stranded here. But they never reach the ships. Hengist might have reformed for a counterattack, but the camp followers, cooks, servants, and slaves had arranged the baggage wagons across the valley floor so they could view the great battle. Now it is like a dam holding back the flood. And what was in these baggage wagons? Why, it was the pieces and parts of some furniture dragged halfway across a continent, the actual round table itself. No quarter is given, and many of the devils are slaughtered. And so ends the greatest battle that the Dark Ages have ever known. Were this battle to have been lost, then, quite possibly, civilization as we know it and love it would have vanished forever from the face of the earth.